And you can set it up there. So on this one, then you just hit start, and then you turn to 5 like that. John at 6.
What's that?
It's 6.
We were waiting for 10 more. Okay.
Start with that?
You got a warm. He's right there. All right.
Okay. Good eyes. So we're going to start here in just a couple minutes. I know it's 6 o'clock that we normally start, but Tim is in the parking lot, so we'll have one more council member this week, our council commissioner. So we're going to start here in a couple minutes.
I know. Okay, is it on? Yeah. Yes. Welcome, Tim.
Okay. Looks like we have a quorum. Call this meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everyone for showing up this evening. Looks like we have a good turnout. We're always appreciative to hear the input from the public. We wish we could have this every time we have a meeting. So you're more than welcome, and we really do appreciate as commissioners having everyone show up this evening. Call to the public. This is a business meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The town values and welcomes public input. Please address the commission as a whole and not individually commission members. Do not address staff or members of the audience. Commission action on items brought up and called to public is limited by the open meeting law. The commission may direct staff to study the matter and reschedule for further consideration at a later date. Items on the agenda will not be heard or discussed and called to the public. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes. Minutes C1. Consider approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Planning and Zoning held on May 26, 2022. Did the commissioners have an opportunity to review those minutes? And did anyone see a need for any corrections, modifications? No? Maybe call them. I got the cards here. So I do apologize. So I'm just kind of thrown into this role currently. So bear with me. Jeremiah, are these 3 cards for called to public?
They'll put either the agenda item on there, Yeah, it should state on there, John.
Big X.
Rob, was yours an agenda item or a call to the public?
D1 and D2, right?
Okay.
Where everybody stand?
D1, yeah, so there's no
Okay.
follow-up.
There's business items and somebody else was talking.
Correct. So it's not, does anyone want to speak that didn't provide a card and call the public? All right, continuing on. Minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for May 26, 2022 as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All right. Unanimous? Any discussion? No. Moving on, D1, new business. Information discussing and public hearing regarding the approval of conditional use permit CUP 132 to put a guest ranch on property located at APN 212-01036M. Mr. Williams?
Staff at the first and then you can get that.
Thank you. Kind of deferring to Mr. Williams, who's been here a little bit longer than me. Jeremiah, the staff report regarding this issue or recommendations from the town.
So we were approached by Brett Coe, who's in attendance tonight, and he wanted to know what other options he would have for this for his parcel that he obtained from the Forest Service, and he had an idea that, and obviously he's versed in town code and looked at it and saw that this was a conditional use permit or a conditional request for the guest ranches, and so that's what he's proposing here tonight. Is to operate a guest ranch similar to what his family operates in Tucson, Haverbury, and several others, is my understanding. So he has experience doing this type of operation before. I think that he has a lot to bring to the community and a lot to offer if the citizens are willing to hear him out and see what he's proposing here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Wooler. I'll just dive into these.
Make a call for what you want to call. That's in the past.
Mr. Coe can talk.
Yeah.
Would you care to address the commission?
Yes. Sorry. Not sure of your order of business.
Don't feel bad. I'm not.
Thank you, commissioners, for having me tonight. It's been a while since I've been here. My name is Brett Coe. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. I have a house up here in the area, so I'm spending quite a bit of the year up here. We acquired this property through the Forest Service exchange that took place in 2017, I believe. For years now, I've been kind of thinking what to do with this property. It's very special. I know it's special to the community. And I see it as the highest and best use as a hospitality offer. And so I grew up at the Take Verde Guest Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. My family's been in the hospitality business since the 20s. We've been in the guest ranch business since 1940 in Tucson. Grandfather bought a ranch called Desert Willow. He bought Take Verde Guest Ranch in '56, and my dad took over late 60s, ran it for 40 years, and my mom took over. I grew up in operations, no longer in operations. We still have the ranch. I'm on the board of the company. We're very proud of the ranch. I think it's one of the best guest ranches in Arizona, if not the country. And kind of a fun little thing. Many of you are fans of the show on Bravo called Top Chef. We were the season finale 2 weeks ago. They did it at our new giant wedding barn. It's quite something. Looks up at the Rincon Mountains. All right, I'll walk you through the presentation. On the cover sheet, the only thing to know is there's 4 websites. These websites have great pictures and detailed explanations of what various ranches are, and also my family business. Page 1, this next page, this shows the parcel 212-01036M and the hashed out mark. This is the record of survey from when the land came out of the Forest Service. Now some parcels have been sold off, but this is the large parcel remaining. And I'm sure the commissioners know that for the record, this is not the RV parcel. It's completely a separate parcel. I have no ownership on that parcel. We might flip back and forth between page 1 and 2. Page 2 is a clean version of record of survey. I have this here because it's clean without the hash marks. You can kind of see what's going on with the property. You can kind of see the Camp Toddy property. You can see the Camp Race property. You can see the rim trail parking, and then where the rim trail goes out into the parcel. And then some of the other physical features. I think a likely site for a guest ranch would be Site A, marked on page 2, or Site B. Why is that? I spent quite a bit of time out there. These parcels, those particular sites have privacy and they have views. I think that would be important to any guest ranch operation. Now, why have I not come forward with a specific site plan? If any of you have been out there, you know it's quite rocky. The closer you get to better views, the more difficult your infrastructure gets. And so I think you can definitely make a working branch in that area, but to give you specifics, I probably have to go out there and do soil tests, quite a bit of engineering work, and some surveying. I think both those sites are viable. Switch to page 3. I want to spend a little time on this map. This is not a Tank Pretty Guest Ranch investment. I am using Tank Pretty Guest Ranch as an example. The map before you is a mature, built-out guest ranch that's recognized as one of the leaders in the industry. The history of guest ranches, how do guest ranches start? That's probably what you're asking. What is this going to look like? Well, I think I looked at our own history. Tank Pretty Guest Ranch started in 1868, with the Carrillo family. It's just a homestead at the time, and a working cattle ranch. It was that all the way until 1920, when Jim Converse bought it, started bringing guests out there. In 1930, looking at our photo albums, we had rooms 1 through 8 and buildings C, B, and D, which were the convertible ranch house that we welcomed us and fed them. That's how we started out. And then the ranch grew organically over the years. So it took 90 years to get to this current configuration. So this is what a mature guest ranch looks like. But even if you could snap your fingers, you wouldn't go to this on that site right away. It would take a long, long time of investment and planning to get anything close to this. And I think I would want to start very small and build up like my family has done. I think that makes the most sense. I'm familiar with the Southern Arizona brand and working in the Sonoran Desert. This is a different market, it's a different product, it's a different customer. I don't think you would want to overbuild without knowing the market and your customers specifically. So what differentiates a guest ranch, right? In my mind, often it's an equestrian offering, right? But not always. So there's some guest ranches that don't have horses. Many do. I think it's the lack of density and the closeness to nature. And if we look at our ranch, we bring guests in, they park their car, and they walk the rest of the time on the property. And if we look at how this guest ranch, this guest ranch is a rolling hill topography. Obviously, the topography on this parcel is different, so it'll be a different build-out. But small cluster groups of rooms create intimacy. Usually you have walk-off between the rooms. If it's a double queen, then you can have 4 queens, so you can have a larger family, you have the groups. But they're small clusters with guest units put throughout the site so that it preserves privacy and views. Now, this parcel, we've all been out to the rim trail, I assume. If you walk out to the end of the rim trail, it falls off to the left, and it's forest on the right going back over to Highway 260. So site A is quite a ways past the end of the rim trail. However, it would be probably, I think the build out would be in more of a lineal fashion, an amoeba fashion that we have here, because you want to have the units staggered along where they can see off the rim. And you can also see we've added a lot of amenities over the years. Everything from tennis courts to pools, to various arenas, to wedding facilities. When we started out in 1930, we had horseback riding, walking in the desert, and a campfire. That was the amenity. I think this particular site, one of the early amenities would be a mountain biking program. I think that would be easy to do. and I think highly desired. So what do these rooms look like? This is a Southern Arizona model on page 4. This is an example of one of our mid-range, one of our nice rooms, not our top end rooms. They're small but elegant. They have a little personal space outside. These, guest ranches have things that define them, make them unique other than different hospitality offerings. We've never put a TV in any room we've ever run. And almost exclusively none of our rooms have kitchens. We're not building condos, we're building guest units, people come and stay. I follow that same model. Now there's a couple different, on page 5, kind of shows you what guest ranch do. And we have an exhaustive list. Some of these things, some of the things that are new. We just brought in an apiary. So that's new to us, but we have a lot of people come to the ranch and never ride. So we have yoga, nature programs. You can certainly take a look. But I think in the beginning years of a guest ranch, you start small. And the nature itself and the views is enough draw. So one of the offerings I think that might make sense out here is, I don't know how familiar people are with Under Canvas. It's a national glamping company. They have sites up on the Grand Canyon, Smoky Mountain, Glacier, Moab. And these are luxury glamping tents. And they offer guests a really unique experience. It's camping, but it's at a very, very high level. And we have experience with this down at Tapered Guest Ranch. Under Canvas contacted us and they wanted to do their first winter offering. And so we invited them down to the ranch and they came out, they set up tents for about 70 occupants. It worked very well. It was very well received with our guests. The guests would stay sometimes they'd stay with them first and then they'd come over and stay with us in our units. They were only there a year. Unfortunately, the two organizations were fighting over spring break. The facilities were maxed out, so that didn't work out. But the offering is sound, and it was very attractive to guests. The advantage of these are you can quickly get started with a number of guests. And it is remarkable. The Southern Arizona desert, as far as it's very fragile. If you put a scar in it, it lasts a long time. These tents are right up against the desert. They don't use a single foot more than they need to. And it's only 2-foot walking paths between the tents and back to the main house. There's a welcome center and a gathering tent. That's where you have breakfast. Under Canvas, even up in some of their off-sites like Grand Canyon and some other stuff, don't offer food. They offer breakfast and breakfast tents, much like some of the hotels do, but they don't offer lunch or dinner. I think that's a very, I've actually talked to Under Canvas about this property, so that's an ongoing discussion. 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Washington Post about Western camping and glamping, and one of the ranches they mentioned was called the Conestoga Ranch up in Utah. This ranch has a mixture of glamping tents, much like Under Canvas, and they also have these really neat Conestoga wagons. And these images are not from Conestoga Ranch, they're from their sister company that makes the wagons. And I called and talked to them at length. They're actually kind of a neat thing. For the balloon festival, I could put one up to the truck and drive into town and have a booth and show it off. And the typical setup, what you do there is it's 2 wagons and then a bathhouse, so each wagon has their own individual bath. And if you flip back to Under Canvas, Under Canvas is really adept at, we had to bring power to the site and give them water, but it was all above ground, and they managed their own waste treatment on site, which then hauled off site. So when they left, there was really nothing intrusive about it. On my take, I love our mountain cabins. And, the log siding, the brown colors, the traditional look. I think it's a little overdone, personally. And let's be honest, a lot of the product out there has not been kept up to evolving guest expectations. I think there's a real opportunity to To differentiate ourselves and provide an experience for the guests with a more modern mountain cabin. I have a couple examples of that. These are not the end design, but they're designed I did like. Now, I have to grab one. Bear with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Let me grab the agenda. So there might be some questions. All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Maybe that's a question.
Yeah, are you done with your presentation?
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off. in the
No, I'm done.
presentation for later.
Only if you have questions.
If any of the commissioners have any questions before it.
So,
go ahead.
as you started growing your ranch and looking at all your activities, do you feel like there are more businesses, the businesses in the area where we continue expanding, or guests who go into those businesses to go fly fishing, go all these different activities you have, they're not all your activities or businesses that are being ran. Did you see an economic growth with those businesses in your area?
Sure. For example, in the early years, I would choose not to bring an equestrian program in. I had a conversation with Portermount yesterday, and they're too busy this summer, but I don't have any guests this summer. But we could bring guests over to them to do trail rides, and they'd also be willing to bring horses over to the ranch and do a program there. And I think, if we had one of our 143 acres is not the same as national forest, tons of miles of trails. It is enough to do educational program and a children's program. And there may be some way to work with the camps on providing some riding. And yeah, I think a lot of these, the mountain biking program, could we source that in the community? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions?
This is 142.69 acres. How many proposed buildings are you talking putting on this acreage?
Sure. Well, to give you an example. Under canvas at us was 70 people. I think that's maybe divided by 2 or 3 for tents. Conestoga Ranch has about 150 people max. So if it's 2 or 3 people per wagon or tent, you do the math there. Tank Pretty Guest Ranch, on spring break, if we put out every rollaway, and sometimes we do 2 kids in a rollaway, we do about 250. So if you compare that to Camp Grace is advertising to do 200 people on 20 acres. So this is significantly less dense than what Camp Grace is doing immediately adjacent. Or just R1, if it's 140 single-family homes, the density is quite less, and the physical square footage impact is quite less. But you can't, it's inconceivable you to go jump to even a quarter of what Tank Pretty Guest Ranch is doing now, in any time in short order. I think that would be impossible.
How many acres is the Tank Pretty Ranch?
We have several different parcels. I think it's 460.
Any other questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Coe, for the presentation. Now we're going to call the public. The first card I have is Mr. Mattice. Just please keep in mind you're limited to 3 minutes. 5. Oh, it does say 5. I do apologize.
Thanks very much for hearing me tonight. In the memorandum from Mr. Lloyd, he references.
Can you please speak up,
Yeah.
sir? Excuse me. Can you please speak up or raise the mic?
Code didn't need it. Is that better?
A little bit, yeah.
In the memorandum from Mr. Lloyd for this meeting on the conditional use permit, he references the guest ranches and they require a conditional use permit. He also references the equine regulations, which Mr. Cota just explained he probably wouldn't have horses on the property, but we don't know. Tanque Verde Ranch says it's 60,000 acres. So the conditional use permit review process, the criteria in 17.80.040, some of the critical items that the Planning and Zoning Commission is required to review is the access, traffic, pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation. Granted, there's lots of access to the property, but what are we really talking about? I mean, are we talking about granting a commercial hotel and letting them put one room there, and then they can add as many rooms as they want? Because with this conditional use permit, you don't seem to have, once you grant it, do you have control after that? The code is really unspecific about what happens to the conditional use permit with regard to changes or additions or additional items that need to go on. Proposed styling of the structures and the relationship to the surrounding properties. On letter E, the site plan and the building permits requirements, landscaping and screening provisions, on-site and off-site improvements, signage and outdoor lighting in the application. Mr. Code indicated that he's going to have a sign on 260, however, that's going to be off-site sign, which is permitted, but we have to comply with the regulations. Under 17.80.050, the conditions for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Conditions reasonably necessary to ensure the property's compatibility with surrounding properties in the neighborhood. I guess what we're talking about is they're going to be compatible initially, and then it's going to change over time to become a Tanque Verde Ranch with lots of people and lots of cars and lots of activity and lots of noise. I don't know the answer to that. Condition imposed to secure or to ensure adequate on-site and off-site improvements. Other conditions under letter C, adequate ingress and egress, the duration of the use permit. So a conditional use permit is not in perpetuity for your code. It says it's got a duration. Time limits on construction, noise, vibration, and light limitations. Why am I sensitive about the noise? Because I can hear Camp Grace screaming and hollering and yelling all night long till about 10 o'clock. Okay, so the development on the conditional use permit under 17.80.090, the conditional use permit shall become void 2 years after the date of approval unless the following have occurred. The conditional use permit has been established when a building permit has been issued. So that's kind of interesting. The use permit doesn't even take effect. It has a limit of 2 years to start, but it doesn't take effect until a building permit is issued. An extension can be granted, but that extension cannot exceed 30 months from the date that it was originally granted. And if we don't have equine, then those issues basically go away. But the equine provisions say it's going to regulate horses and the keeping of equine family in the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. All applications for keeping horses, this is 17.104.110, number 2. All applications for keeping horses must comply with the requirements of B and C of this section. And B and C says, prior to approval of the conditional use permit under this section, the applicant must provide a detailed site plan showing the following information: the location of all dwellings and commercial structures within 200 feet of any portion of the proposed facility, the location of drainage facilities, etc., and the location and design of all fencing. So this may be a nice use for this property. However, predicated upon the code, we don't have enough information in order to make a compliance requirement of Mr. Code at the current time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mattias. Number 2, the other card I have, I believe, is Ralph Enger. Is that correct? Mr. Enger?
It's Engler. With an L.
Engler. My mistake. Thank you.
problem. I guess I'm a little confused over the fact that when I printed out from your website about an hour ago, it was this size. 2 pages. And then I walk in, and it's this. Why?
One is the agenda, and the other is the agenda packet.
Sorry?
One is, I believe that one of the items you have is the agenda, and then the other item is the agenda packet. I can't see it.
Well,
I guess.
I guess my point, folks, is, this is what we're told this meeting is about. Then we come to the meeting, and there's a whole lot more information. Then Mr. Koch gives a whole bunch more information. How are the citizens of this community supposed to be responding to something like this?
Excuse me, we post the agenda. Packets are always available at town hall to pick up. We don't post the whole packet.
So,
It's available here.
so you're telling me that this packet was available yesterday?
Yes. Or which one are you talking about?
The one with 25 pages in it, not the one with 2 pages.
Right.
Yes, we had it. Mhm.
I see. I'm surprised that some of the facts on the fact sheet set significantly away from all neighbors. Huh. When I look at parcel A, this is back in the days when we had a referendum. Remember that? Mobile home park referendum, defeated at least 2-1. Gee, looks like it's right against Camp Teddy. You notice I'm wearing the Lions badge. I'm concerned. I don't know, folks. I'm not impressed with our town manager.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Mr. Ingalls?
Does it say on there with raised hand or not? I try to write that down.
It does. Do you not want to speak since you didn't raise your hand? Is that what you were trying to convey?
I kind of like to listen to everybody so I don't repeat what others have said.
Well, you're the last one I have a card for, Rob.
Oh,
so
I did.
it worked
Okay.
out.
I
Worked
saw
out
a
perfectly.
full room tonight, and I felt there's probably concern, and that's why people were here. Out of curiosity, did the commissioners receive a letter from a Norris Dodd?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Was it asked to be shared at this meeting with people, or just for you as commissioners?
So I provided it to the commission, they have it at their
Okay, he didn't request that it be read into the public hearing record tonight?
He did request that it be read.
Okay. I did review a letter that was presented to you, and I'll say right off, I agree very much with what Mr. Dodd said. And hearing some of the confusion tonight, the packet that I picked up last Friday, the criteria required for a conditional use permit is all handwritten. And some of the lines just say none, not applicable. The same thing with other unique and relevant circumstances which exist. I'm one that feels that the Rim Trail is an extremely valuable asset to this community. And so as the land exchange occurred, the record of decision that allowed that to occur, in my opinion, was something that is valued by the citizens of this community as a public asset. And as various parcels have now gone to commercial and requests have been made for RV parks, I was hopeful that maybe the definition of guest ranch, which would be appropriate for this group to maybe read the definition as part of what would be proposed, and then looking at the criteria, I felt that that record of decision for the land exchange wasn't even mentioned as being relative criteria for tonight's meeting. And the packet information tonight was supplemented with typewritten responses versus what was available last Friday. So I had reviewed things over the weekend prior to coming, and I see what was handed out tonight is different, confusing. I'll make a couple other comments here. I'm shocked that a conditional use permit would be a blanket approval to move ahead with conceptual ideas that are based on what's in another location in our state. our Pinetop-Lakeside environment and that forested parcel, kind of considered as a gateway into the city, is such an asset for all of us, that both drawing visitors in and the locals. And I just figured there would be some kind of conceptual site plan of where maybe the management, I'll say living, where buildings might go, where access to get to what they want to do would be laid out on that land. And I feel it's a real shortcoming to expect you as a commission to come up with granting a conditional use permit with the shared expectations of the growth that a successful guest ranch that was described to us tonight, without having more say in the very beginning of it. There's things that, let's see, the public benefits of this, yes, there could be, but I didn't hear those discussed. I thought possibly swimming pools, riding arenas, things like that, and unless I was confused that that's the other out of this area of development, there's no intention. To me, conceptually, those things are all important when I would be considering granting a conditional use permit for this use. Mr. Mattice made some comments, and I think those are very relevant for you guys as a commission to consider. I wouldn't mind coming back again and getting more information on the specifics and having this public hearing postponed, because I feel it is extremely vague what was in front of you as a commission tonight. And the criteria that is supposed to be adhered to is marginally compliant with what I think is reasonable for this community to expect. So if somebody would read the guest ranch criteria, I didn't find it to read it before coming tonight, but I read the one for Navajo County, I read one for a community in Utah, and I'm not so sure, but I do not know, because I didn't read ours locally, but I'm concerned about the ramifications, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ingles. As always, we appreciate your input and your diligence for everything.
Just one quick comment in regard to what our town code lists for requirements for guest rents. The one requirement it has is that you have to at least have 10 acres. And so clearly, Mr. Code has more than 10 acres, so he meets that requirement. And the other, all it says is guest rents provided the site contains at least 10 acres and building, housing, animals are set back from all lot lines a distance of 50 feet, subject to securing a conditional use permit requirements and compliance regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. I saw a hand. Do you wish to speak in it? I don't know your name, sir.
Fill out a card.
Yeah. Well, you can come to.
I did not fill out a card.
Okay. You can come to the podium and announce who you are. And yeah.
Okay.
This also will get you a card.
My name is Matt Russell, and I was not planning on speaking this evening, Commission. My wife and I have a property just behind, north of where the property is in discussion, and we actually personally know about Tankerville Ranch. My wife's and my business, I've actually been working with them since 2009, carpet tile upholstery cleaning business. The business is amazing to work for. If you walk onto that Tankerville Ranch, it has obviously developed since the 1800s. They did a phenomenal job on keeping the natural habitat, animals. They only took the amount of land needed just to put their guest houses there. And as Mr. Cope did mention, you do have to walk everywhere. There's not running a train system throughout the place. It's not an amusement park. So I guess I'll just conclude. I won't even take up 3 minutes. I'm just speaking my opinion. I'm going to say that we're glad it would not be a major housing development that would just plow down all the beautiful forest and take it all the way to habitat, and then just put up more asphalt and put up non-native trees and non-native plants that we see that happens in the communities here. And it's not going to be another huge piece of asphalt like the U-Haul storage center or big RV center. So I guess if there's any evils, the lesser the 2 evils or the lesser the 10 evils, I think it would be a good option. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Cote, if you could come back to the podium and if you'd like to address some of the concerns, some of the other citizens had voiced.
I'd like to thank the public for their comments. Do you have any direct questions, or you want me to address what was just brought up?
Yeah, if you would like to address any of the comments that were brought up, concerns, Mr. Ingles and a
Yep.
variety of them had some concerns about the conceptual idea, what you're going to put there. If you could kind of direct some of your answers that may help shed some insight to us too as a commission on
Absolutely.
addressing those. Thank you.
So there is quite a bit of access off of Wagon Wheel Road, and I own the 10-acre parcel that's on the highway, so that there's a possibility to cut in almost immediately on Wagon Wheel Road. There's also access a couple different spots off of Highway 260, and a couple areas of emergency egress for EMS that are different than that. The ranch is not 60,000 acres. I heard that comment. It's maybe we have 460 or 500 acres as the ranch itself. And then we butt up to the Sworn National Monument. I don't know how big that is. And then we also butt up to Lincoln National Forest. We did operate a ranch up there called the Bayota. It was a working cattle ranch. And that ranch was under a Forest Service lease for $60,000. So that when that comes up on our website, that's the $60,000 acre, because it had a bunch of pastures up there on Reddington Pass. Go through the landscaping and screening provisions and the site plan. I think part of the attraction of a guest ranch and this type of offering is you have to be away from it. You have to be away from the residents over on Wagon, and you don't want to be anywhere near the camp as best you can be. And both of those sites I put out, I think, provide a pretty good buffer. I don't anticipate any riding program in the beginning, as I mentioned, because and we could address those requirements later if that becomes something viable for the ranch. I think at the ranch, when it starts out, how many buildings would we have? I think we'd want to start out with probably 3 clusters, maybe 9 rooms, with the option to go bigger. That in a main welcoming center, that's a hard build. I think you could go bigger with a camp build right away. Maybe I see this as, because I grew up with it, I can see this map and I can see the topography out there. And so I can say, hey, yeah, we need units. On my map here, I've got, I know Javelina Heights up on units 24, 23, 21, 20, 19, 18. I'm like, boy, those are great units. I think you could put those, 400 yards past the end of the rim trail. They would have a view. They'd be separated out from everybody. As far as the parking, we could bring people into the site. We would create one major parking area, and then everyone would walk on the ranch. Or we have golf carts at the ranch for people who need golf carts. And then, back of the house, obviously, that's going to have something more substantial. But I think that would solve the site problem. I guess, what are the concerns about we're going to, the architectural comment? I'd like to push back on that. I mean, I think it's so far in there, who's going to see it? Our vision of the architecture should be our vision of the architecture. So I think that addresses that. Anyone else want to review what I'm missing here?
Any commissioners have any question while we have Mr. Coe at the podium? I want to take that as no.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. I think I can speak on behalf of the commissioners. We're aware of the property and the history and everything that's kind of happened with it. We're all aware that it has to be developed into something. I appreciate this gentleman's, I can't remember your name's comment, about the quality of the facility that you own and run in Tucson. I know for me personally, it's nice that you're walking everywhere, and it seems to me that the big ethos to the whole development is to be symbiotic with nature, and that's the whole experience you're selling. like I said, no TVs in the room. Like you're not driving anywhere in cars, and it seems like you're trying really hard to create something that would fit in. And the same hand, I understand the community's concern. It's kind of what we wrestle with, right? What exactly does that look like? There's no way to know until something happens. And I understand your position is, if you can't get a CUP, I don't want to spend $50,000 to try to develop something that I can't, that's going to get a lot of pushback. So
We have some examples of that.
yeah, and not to dive into it, and I think, and I'm trying to speak for everyone up here. We understand this is completely separate. It's nothing to do with the RV park. I want to be very clear on that. You're not the owner of the RV park. This is something else altogether. I don't have any other questions for you. I appreciate your time and the community's time. If no commissioners have.
I have a question up there. We need to address them.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't have a question. Someone else is raising their hand.
Oh, where?
I have a question. Wagon Wheel Road right now is very restricted. I live in Wagon Wheel Park. Right now, vehicles come in there, they have no exit off of Wagon Wheel Road. They come in our wagon wheel, make U-turns. Even school buses do that. The dust is unbelievable. And I live right there on that first corner.
I believe Mr. Coe said he owns 10 acres on the frontage, so.
I'd like to see a little bit more site planning.
Sure.
You talk about horses. When you talk about horses, then you talk about alfalfa. And then you talk about 18-wheelers bringing it in. Where's it going to go? On Wagon Wheel Road?
Well, I do believe kind of the idea is to partner with local communities instead.
I would like to see more site planning
To do.
before we accept this.
I appreciate your comments and understand your concerns.
For the record, sir, can we get your name?
Yeah, they have to put you into the public record when you speak in the
Can
forum.
we get your name?
Tosi, T-O-S-I.
And
First name is Peter, middle initial D.
and where you reside?
5982 F Street.
I think we're good. I'll close this to close the public hearing. Anybody have any comments before we?
We are allowed under planning and zoning to make restrictions in the CUP. It's not just an open-ended for building. We can put 100-foot setback from the property line to the first building, we put 200-foot setbacks. There's no stipulation of what we can say as far as a setback or how many buildings. I mean, we're not going to leave it open-ended. Right now, it's just asking for a CUP. But I'm not in favor of saying, here's carte blanche, build however many you want. I mean, we can put restrictions on how many can be built in that area, and if they want more, depending on how it goes down the road, they can come back before us and request more before us.
Well, there would be a site plan they have to present to the
Correct,
town.
and that's why, I mean, there's certain things that we can allow and put restrictions on this, and then they can come back before us again.
Yeah, but then you're saying there can be restrictions placed, but it's just what this gentleman's saying. Where is the detailed site plan? It's not Tankerville. That was a ranch. This is a piece of Ponderosa Forest. I think you owe it to the town to do your homework before you approve this.
The public forum's closed right now, so, commissioners don't address the public, so we have to, it's an action item, so we gotta move forward on it. Do I have a motion? Anybody?
I guess my question is kind of this, so like, what's the next step? So, if we approve it tonight, or we make a motion to pass it, what next steps are?
It goes to council.
And the council can,
In the past, the recommendations made from you guys, I reviewed the authority and powers that you guys have. You guys actually have the power to grant a conditional use permit tonight. So when it goes to council, you do have the authority, as Commissioner Williams said, to attach any conditions that the commission may see fit to the conditional use permit. And some of those include conditions reasonably necessary to ensure the property's compatibility with the surrounding properties in the neighborhood. Conditions imposed to ensure adequate on-site and off-site improvements. Any other conditions of the conditional use permit for the site plan imposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, including limitations on lot size, building dimensions, and location, requirements for additional landscaping or unbuilt lot area buffers, provision of adequate ingress and egress, duration of the conditional use permit, hours of operation of the use, time limits on construction, mitigation of adverse environmental impacts, noise, vibration, and light limitations. So this is the powers that the commission has, and those are directives of some of the conditions placed on the conditional use permit.
Because some of the public talked about noise, and we can put stipulations. 10 o'clock, all noise has to be to a talking level.
Is that not in the town code anyway?
Yeah, so there already is a noise ordinance, and I believe it's 11 o'clock, where the decibels are greatly reduced for the rest of the day. 11 to 6 a.m.
So there's already restrictions that are inherently applied to the property, regardless of a CUP. So I guess the real question is then, A, do we want to approve a CUP? B, if so, we want to place restrictions on those and see what those restrictions would be?
But not, it's premature to do it tonight.
Possibly, yes. It depends on what the restrictions are. But I have a question for Jeremiah. Do they have to get a ADOT survey done?
For access?
Correct.
Possibly, if he's accessing off of White Mountain Boulevard, but
Yeah, 260, that's the state. So it's like the same thing. ADOT's going to anything up to 260.
But if it's off of Wagon Wheel Lane and it creates a lot more congestion, is that a concern for the town or the city?
The county, right? Is it the county? Is Wagon Wheel Lane?
Well, north of Wagon Wheel Road is in the county, yes. And then if there was a request from Mr. Code to have access on the corner, which he also owns, correct? He would submit that to ADOT and they would review it for to meet all the stipulations or requirements of traffic. And they would most likely do a traffic impact analysis at that point.
So I think the real question we just need to ask ourselves, to start with in order, is this something that the commission wants to approve? We're going step by step here. The next would be, do we want to add restrictions? So can I get consensus, not a vote, on who wants to allow a CUP? We're not voting on, but we're just trying to walk through the steps here.
I'm in favor of approving a CUP.
Okay?
And two.
That's part two, Tim. What's that?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone agrees. So restrictions of the CUP. What do you think would be a reasonable restriction?
I think, is this something that can be further discussed at
Not if we
another
make a-
meeting?
Not if we
At
make a motion.
Yeah, not if we make a motion.
I mean, to just look
Yeah.
at what different restrictions might be and what those impacts could be, I think would be helpful.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think, are we able to have that meeting with, Mr. Cohen, visit with him on, hey, here's what we're thinking, how can you do it? Like you mentioned, you have no idea what's going on with the ground, the gravel, the cost, et cetera. I mean, is it a sense of, do we work closer with him on that part, getting more specifics, or do we not even need the specifics for this permit at this point?
We don't need the specifics, but we can put stipulations in there and put it as natural to the topography. For parking, instead of putting asphalt in, it could be left with cinders or dirt, so it's that and not torn up.
Because I guess one of my concerns is that the public are coming in saying, hey, we want to see more details, but are the details required for this permit? Or is that comes later?
We could do a carte blanche CUP, but I think everyone in general on the commission and the public too, if they're going to allow it, want us to have some idea. We don't have to have it, but I agree with Allison. We need to kind of take a look at what
And is
would work well.
just approving a site plan later, is that enough?
That's a separate step, right? Site plan
Right,
is
so
a
that's what I was
separate
going to
step.
mention is,
Yeah.
even if the conditional use permits were approved, Mr. Coe would still have to come back to the commission and submit a site plan, and that is also one of your guys' two powers, that you have the conditional use permit and the site plan review. So it would come back to you guys at that point for review again and approval.
So it's not just a carte blanche that he can come in and put in
No.
3 little clusters, and then next year he puts in 6 more clusters, and he doesn't have to come back each time to
It depends on how we put this into our.
Well, that's what I want to make sure that we approve it, knowing that we're going to approve it
We have
every
a-
step of the way.
Additional oversight
Right.
as the project moves down, and we do.
Is that fair?
Yeah, the site plan still has to be approved. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
With a cap on it of say 20 buildings or 30 buildings or whatever we want, and then it has to be brought before us to add more to it. I mean, because if you did it open-ended, he could add, by the time this is done, 200 buildings, 300 buildings down the road, 10 years from now, and the public may not want that. So I mean, that's what I don't want. That he have to come back before us after so much time to add. They just can't keep adding to it.
I mean, you'd still have to approve it and bring a site plan, but you're right, you can put a cap on it where he can't come past that, but if you don't put a cap on it, he still has to bring a site plan in front of us, at which point we could still say, hey, we don't want to approve any more buildings.
Because we can
That's
see how
possible.
it's going with the neighborhoods, see how things are going with 20, 30, whatever buildings we approve, and then down the road, it come back before us, and then we apply for additional buildings that we put on. If there's been no noise, no complaints from neighbors, no things from the community.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Make-
I move to approve conditional use permit CUP 132 and allow a guest ranch to be constructed on assessor parcel number 212-01-036 in.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion. You didn't put any stipulations in there, so I can't approve it. I can't vote for it without
Okay.
any stipulations in there.
So my question on that, then,
I think it's premature to put stipulations on this CUP because we haven't seen any conceptual plan at all. We don't know what we would be stipulating against, or
Well, we need to call for a
it
vote,
may be
right?
unnecessary stipulations, or it might
So we can put in there how many.
it might become an undue burden on the applicant.
Yeah.
Not if we put
Tim,
down
Tim,
setbacks, like say they can build so many feet within the things we do that in the CUP.
we just need.
And that can be done at site
Site
plan.
plan.
Site plan
Site plan.
approval. Yeah, site plan approval. So you don't agree, that's fine. Let's vote on it. There was a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yep. So 4, 2, 5 carries.
Ladies and
So,
gentlemen, the
Tim
code doesn't
votes
allow
what?
you to do that.
It's
Tim is voting against
yeah,
or not voting?
yeah.
Without the stipulations, I have to vote against it.
Okay, so one name. So moving on.
Excuse me, point of
No, Mr. Ingles, Mr. Ingles, no, Mr. Ingles, we're Mr. Ingles.
I would like the director to share that with the people that have gathered tonight. There's a 10-day limit on appeal, and some might be interested in being worried about the
Mr.
action
Lloyd.
that occurred.
So, Mr. Ingles is correct. There is a time frame allotted for appeal from either the applicant or members of the public, in which case it would then go to the Board of Justice.
All right, thank you. D2, I do believe. D2, information and discussion regarding a major amendment to the land use element of the 2015 general plan. Mr. Lloyd?
You guys, we still have a meeting going on, so can you, yeah, thank you. Can you guys please head out back? People have a meeting going on. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lloyd, on D, item T2, please. Any staff reports on that?
Right, so we've been, commission and staff have diligently working on a major land use, update for the general plan. This is the third meeting we've had, just with discussion in regard to this item. and I think we made some progress last time, and so what you see on the screens before you tonight is what we discussed last time, so I'd like to show you what the general plan would look like with with everything that we talked about last time. Give me a second here, I'm expand here. Okay, so this is the first part that we discussed which also was the same area that we discussed earlier tonight. If I can get my screen share work here. Sorry, this is, we wanted to do it this way just so we could have the maps up instead of how we did it last time, but I think that we weren't really set up for it, so bear with me for a minute here.
Take your time.
Is this map you're showing us have the highlighted recommended changes we discussed previously?
Right,
Okay.
It's what we discussed last time, what you saw before it crashed was the area, the same area that we were talking about tonight. That will be identified as area 1 last time. And let's see here. And so the changes that we discussed were basically identifying that as a planned unit development in that area, and then up front would be zone commercial. And then we also jumped to area 5, which looks like my maps will come back up.
There we go.
Which was over in this area here, which was also identified as forest in the 2015 general plan, but hadn't yet to even get one again. So basically, it wasn't identified as open space; it was identified as forest, which was no density. So this we're aiming at clarifying what that means. And so, based on the direction of the commission last time, we have in that area behind along Willow Creek and to the north of it. Here in this area, we have planned unit development or planned area developments, and then we have the open space along the riparian corridor of Willow Creek, and then to the north of that, and adjacent to the Forest Service boundary would be.
Low density.
Low density residential. So those are some of the changes that you guys suggested. And then we also briefly discussed, I may have lost these changes, but I tried to fix it, but it looks like it didn't save. So this area we discussed, which doesn't reflect it, we discussed extending the PUD, and then in this area there also be PUD, the cursor is. So
What is that area?
That's the area over by the Pinetop-Lakeside cabins.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so initially I thought the direction was to change that to commercial, but then I read back through the minutes and it was actually to change it to PUD, so I need to update that. Everything else reflects what we had discussed last time. And so tonight I would like to discuss, there's another area that I identified that has the same issue with the identified as forest, and basically limits anything coming into this area because there's no density associated with that. So is that open space? What is that? Is that
what zone is that?
It's forest.
Area here,
It's all the green.
right? So we're out on Port
That's this one right here, right?
Penrod
Yeah.
Drive here, and this whole area all the way out to the town limits has the same designation as forest in the current plan. Now it looks like it's open space on here, but it'll let me pull up some of these other maps. Just a sec here. Yeah, there's word maps. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties again. In a second. We're gonna get this fixed next time. Before we tell our house anyway. I think this is still a little better than what we had last time. Hopefully the public can see the all zoned, or not zoned, excuse me. It's identified in the general plan as forest area. So it's the same request as last time. Do we want our general plan to show that we plan on not having any growth in these areas, or do we want to show that there is potential for growth in these areas? Because there is, let's face it, there's not very many areas left in town. I think we all agree that there's not very many areas left in town that can actually be developed, but this is one of them. So I think that we should be forward thinking and say, well, okay, what do we want in this area? As opposed to, we don't really have a plan because it's owned by the Forest Service. And we get similar situations as tonight when an applicant comes before us and we have to go through this whole process again. What we need to do is plan ahead and have some foresight and to identify the density that we want to see move forward.
And what would staff's recommendation be for?
I want to know what
You
guys-
want to know what we want.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I can tell you what I think, but I think that here's
Plan development up against Penrod,
I think there, eventually, yeah.
a small portion of that.
I think eventually there will be development for that, and I think that other municipalities are already looking towards that direction, that there's going to be development there, because there's not much area left to develop. We're wedged between the Forest Service and the reservation, so there's only a few areas left to develop. So I
Some
think
of that green that you have depicted up there is Forest Service as well as private.
Right,
Okay.
that is a correct statement.
I think the first thing we kind of need to take a look at there would be conforming use, because is that like a water reclamation of some sort on there, like or to the
Well,
right? Like what's actually there? I think would be useful to know.
Right, so I think we can, I mean, obviously we can identify the area on, that's captured here in this area on Shovel Lake, on the south end of Shovel Lake, as part of our water resource element of the general plan, and we could also identify it as floodway. Open space would be an easy call there, because no one's gonna develop Shovel Lake.
So the upper right hand corner,
When we do this, sorry, Commissioner Williams, when we do designate open space, that has to be, it basically has to be approved by the underlying property owner as well, because otherwise we're basically eliminating all their rights to development.
And is that area private or is that forest?
On Shovel Lake,
Yeah, but between like Jake's Marsh and Shola Lake.
I think it's
Nick's Marsh and Shovel Lake, well, the whole area is, most of it is Forest Service, owned by the Forest Service.
But there are like little
portions,
areas in there.
like in here, like this area over here is owned by Freeport McMorran.
Yeah.
And there's some other areas that are, I can't pull it up on this map, but there are other owners besides the Forest Service out here. But I think that regardless of it being owned by the Forest Service, there's always the potential that something won't be, as we see.
So what's the zoning at Porter Mountain Estates, which this kind of borders?
So we have to look at the county for that because it's not in the town.
I can tell you part of it. It's like really mixed in there. There's like, believe it or not, there's like industrial, commercial in the middle of that.
Really?
Yeah, there is.
Well, I don't think we wanted that.
That's what I'm
but-
saying. And then some of I think are, like are low in there. It's really mixed in there from when the house was in there. Right here in this sliver.
In Porter Creek
Yeah.
Estates.
Yeah, right.
the upper right hand
Right,
corner, it's the chimneys, right?
So the chimneys are over here.
Oh, they're outside the green?
Yeah, so basically what we're looking at is this area outside of this developed area, which is interesting. It wasn't annexed. Let's get a second on batteries. I don't know why. I was plugged in.
I would say along the road, Penrod, it should be planned development for possibly businesses.
I see what you're saying. Like following Penrod all around towards the airport there, do a corridor of commercial along.
Commercial or semi-commercial.
I mean, I would agree with that.
So along the
commercial.
Penrod corridor, within like 200 feet of each side or 500 feet of each side, probably commercially designated the general plan.
That seems
Yes,
logical to
because
me.
I mean, we currently, there's a taxidermy shop and then the
Right.
steakhouse and,
It is commercial along the frontage there already in the county piece here, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So let's back to the conforming. Let's keep to the conforming thread and do a corridor of commercial on each side of Porter Mountain there.
Penrod.
Or Penrod, I'm sorry, excuse me, on Penrod. Any discussion on that?
I agree.
Agree?
With that?
All right, if you could do a rendering for us.
And then planned development or low density on the outskirts?
Or even medium density. I mean, that's not real heavily treed property, so it's not going to.
To the south, yeah, because it's Timber Mesa to like the north, right? The Timber Mesa trail system's to the north of that.
I think so. I mean, it's just, I don't know that it needs to be low density.
Maybe medium density towards Shoal Lake, and then towards the forest go low density? No, I don't know.
But the trail goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this top of the green, probably in the top of that would probably be Timber Mesa to Panorama to Flume to Sawmill. Salt trails in there. So medium density is what you're saying off of the corridor. You know, once again, we're just going to get a rendering. We're not saying this away, but Mr. Lloyd's going to kind of.
So this, we're not making any motions.
Exactly.
This will likely come back to you. You'll see this map at least one more time, and then hopefully after that we can move to an action item on the agenda and make a recommendation to council. That's what I'm aiming for.
So yeah, from the base that I agree with, in that top section still, going towards the Shoal Lake, we're going still like in that big block. Can we make that almost like commercial on the far side? Instead of residential, like we could put more resorts or a hotel or something to access the lake on that side. Okay, so it's right.
We get like a PUD.
So PUD.
Yeah, like a PUD in there.
Yeah.
PUD is pretty flexible. It allows for a combination of uses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, but Mr. Rimhall, like we maybe do a PUD in that section, commercial along the corridor, and then the medium density
Medium
use.
density with the rest.
Okay. So let me see if I'm getting what you're thinking, and I'm going to zoom in on this area a little bit. So commercial along Penrod. And
Yes.
Then, and so it'd be like 500 feet on the center line each way. And we got PUD in this area along the backside of Shoal Lake. Is that what we're thinking?
Yes.
And then medium density. Where's the medium density?
Right, that top triangle above.
This area?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
Past the commercial.
Okay. And then what about the area J.Q.'s Marsh? I mean, I don't see that that's ever going to change. Pinetop-Lakeside Sanitary District uses that as a polishing pond for a treatment, basically for effluent.
Maybe just leave that forest then.
I would advise against that.
Okay.
Unless we want to designate what kind of density is
Well,
allowed for. So, I mean, we
What
can-
about the residential or commercial, what did we just do, Camp Grace? What did we call that? Commercial
Oh,
recreation?
recreational?
Yes.
It may fit into
Because
around
maybe-
the edges of it, who knows, someday.
I mean,
I think that's a good.
watching
I
stuff
think that's a
and-
good use. Use the commercial recreational, kind of limits it, but we could have other outdoor activities that could improve the
So,
community. I like
Keep
that.
in mind though that that's a zoning designation, so we probably.
Yes, yeah.
For our land use element, we probably designated like maybe community commercial or something that would fit along the lines of commercial recreational.
That's my thoughts.
That's a great idea, Commissioner Stewart.
Yes. Agreed.
I think are we good on that?
Okay, and then moving south on this area, it's a large area actually. Is there any other thoughts? I mean, we got obviously we have a riparian area in here, so I would think about what we did along Golden Creek. I think I ran a buffer 50 feet each side of the Bowlag, which is basically the center line of the creek, and then have that as open space, but we have to look at who the underlying owners are too. They have to be able to agree to that, because that's one of the things that even
I've
though it's
lost my
obviously not
bearings a
public-
little bit. What?
Huh?
Show me the pink. What's in that pink?
In this area?
Currently, yes.
So yeah, this is. Let me stop. I'll make this a little more transparent here. Give me a sec.
You know, this
This is out by Kylie Lane, so there's really not much going on out there right now.
you turn on Hanson, you go up Hanson and hang a left on Coyote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. now I know where we are. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so you might still not be able to see it if we zoom in there. Yeah, so this is Coyote Lane. So it's basically, I think right now, as far as zoning goes, it's zoned R low, but it's actually, or it's planned for PUD, planned development, planned area development.
I think I'd leave it as PUD.
Yeah, the pink's PUD, I think is what we decided.
I've got a question. On the, you mentioned like 50 feet on the, whatever, can we expand that to like 100 feet?
Yeah, so one of the things I looked at, I'm gonna go back to the area as we discussed last time. So I ran down the center line of the creek, and then I offset 50 feet, but I reduced it in this area because, and we could look at doing something like this sooner, or expand it to 100 feet on each side, or whatever you guys recommend. But I reduced it in this area specifically because it already backs up to the property. So in that case, we would have to go to the property owner and say, hey, will you accept this designation as open space? And then we have to get them to sign off on it, basically, before it can be approved.
So the,
So the answer to the question is, yeah, we can expand it.
but
So
like,
what
when
do
you
you guys want to do?
expanding it to read that, like, that impacts the 5 individuals that are there.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna have a variety of people impact, but I do like the idea of, I like the 100 feet on each side because it keeps a nice corridor through there if eventually something happened, like access to the creek, and helps preserve.
And I think in the public's mind, it's not a big ask to keep this as open space because we want to maintain this riparian area for multiple reasons, for the habitat, for floodplain use, and we don't want it developed.
Yeah.
And I mean, because you could develop in a floodplain, you could even develop in a floodway as long as you go through the Army Corps of Engineers and have an engineer certify that you have zero rise upstream, downstream. This way, we at least can say, no, we don't want to see that much. We don't want to see development in the riparian area.
How would putting a bridge across that affect that? How would putting a bridge across that? Like, so
You can still bridge it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can bridge it. It doesn't prevent a bridge from being created. If there is any disturbances in that, it's basically considered the waterway of the U.S. because it has a significant nexus to Shoal Lake, which goes on down the line to all the lakes, and basically then it ends up in Little Colorado, which ends up in Colorado. So basically, it's a waterway of the U.S. that require a 4-foot permit.
Could you do an overlay with 100 feet for that then? Like,
sure. So
Commissioner
like how we
Hermosa?
did in this area, I could do 100 feet on center or 100 feet total, so 50 foot.
Just do 100 foot on center so we can just see what it looks like and how many properties that affects. Because we're not, it's not an action item, so it's.
Certainly, so we can look at doing that along here. And it looks funny because you can see the floodplain map through the FEMA maps. Was there a question? We were kind of doing this as an informal work session, so go ahead if you have any questions for me.
Yep.
Well, I thought it was a public meeting.
Well, Rob, you said raise hands.
I had my hand up, yeah. Anyway, yeah. The Billy Creek area, I think, is very important. I would recommend beyond 100 feet, as long as it doesn't encroach on people's private properties. Some of us have worked along the area, I think from where the bridge crosses, I think it's Springer Mountain Road, down behind the high school, on trails that the Navajo County, I don't know the exact details, turned over to the town like 20 years ago. And there's a few encroachments of private property into what would otherwise be a trail. But the value of having trails that aren't on a sidewalk down the highway that is our main street through town, for the safety of our kids, all of us, would be great. And I think you can always shrink it down, but in the areas where it's a natural riparian area, the wider the better.
Yeah, I agree. So whatever that means for on your end, I agree.
Well, I will tell you, so I've been down that trail, and I know it, and there's no trail there no more. The school district, when they fenced in the bus yard, they fenced her right over, so you can't, which I'm in agreement with everyone. I like being able to go down there and do it. So, I mean, make it a little bigger, but yeah.
So I have a question. So I'm the property owner that backs that area. What does that mean?
What does that mean? So
Yeah.
if you are a property owner and we expand the open space into your property, we would have to approach you and have you sign and agree to having your property as open space, because basically it limits your right to development in that open space.
Oh, so it limits my right to do anything on it.
Right. As far as development, you would be constrained to what you can put in that area.
Okay. So like the properties is still the same size, et cetera, it's just.
Right. It doesn't affect the size of your property, still your property. You would just you would be approached by myself or somebody at staff level, and you would be notified almost like by us and say, hey, we're considering zoning, or not zoning, but in general, but everyone's gonna know if it's open space, you know, and so that we would need their approval, basically. You can't, state statute and the town code, which are aligned, both state that it can't be zone, it can't be, I keep saying zone, but there is an open space zone, but at this level, it's just open space for the general plan, which is also includes floodplain and other stuff.
So it's not like something hop my fence, like, here's open space, man.
No, all it means is that you wouldn't be able to develop in that open space.
Why not just run the open space where the private property, in the case of, for example, they're north of Coyote, run the open space up to the property. If you want it 100 feet on either side of the creek, make it 100 feet on either side of the creek, except where private property
And that's
doesn't
how I
well.
handled it in the other area that we discussed last time, whenever the offsets, just kind of.
Yeah, let's not dive into the
And then it makes it a
doldrums of
little,
this.
a little easier, like, if we're only dealing with the Forest Service who doesn't recognize zoning, by the way. So, they don't really care if we zone it as open spaces, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Jeremiah, could you do this for us? Can you just give us a couple different renderings, right? 100 feet, 50 feet, 200 feet.
Sure.
And that way we can all take a look at how many properties it impacts and are affected by it to try to make a more educated decision on what we should do. But if you could cut, what does the commission think that's a pretty good idea? We can, like, what do we want? 50 feet? That's what we got.
Yeah.
Do 100 feet. Do a 200 feet. Like,
Yeah.
you know, just let's take a look to see what that really looks like.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, so next time I'll bring that back, I'll have a couple different offsets for you guys to look at.
Perfect.
And all the other items that we discussed in this area. And then we'll move forward from there. So are you guys comfortable with closing the meeting tonight, or you want more discussion, or?
Well, is there any more information on the town? Anything you have to tell us?
We have to stick to the agenda.
Can you put anything down there?
That's so it says adjournment
You can
here.
always follow up with me, Tim. I think you get a message from yesterday. I was doing something else.
Right? If there's going to be no further questions, this meeting is adjourned.